She never meant to send that message. It was a mistake, one born from exhaustion, fear, and desperation. A text meant for her sister landed in the inbox of one of the most powerful men in the city, a billionaire CEO known for his cold heart and ruthless empire. Hours later, his phone rang again, but this time it wasn't business. It was the hospital calling him about a baby he had never met. What followed was not just a twist of fate, but the unraveling of a truth that would shake lives to their very core. Lena lived a life most people never noticed. A single mother working double shifts, she balanced between exhaustion and survival, holding on to hope for her newborn son. Every bill was a battle, every meal stretched thin, and every night was a prayer that tomorrow might be kinder. Her sister was her anchor, the one person she leaned on when the weight became too heavy. That night, with trembling hands, Lena typed a message asking for help. Her son had fallen ill and she couldn't afford the hospital bills. But fatigue betrayed her. One wrong digit, one slip of the thumb, and her desperate words were sent to a stranger. That stranger was Adrian Cole, billionaire, SEO. A man who lived in a glass tower above the city, untouchable and unbothered by the lives of those below. To him, mistakes were liabilities and weakness had no place in his empire. When he saw the text, he almost deleted it. Just another scam, he thought. But something about the words, the rawness, the pain between the lines, made him hesitate. He didn't reply. Not yet. Hours later, his phone lit up again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call from a hospital, urgent and insistent. They asked for him by name. They said it was about a baby. His world, built on control and precision, tilted into chaos with those words. Adrian arrived at the hospital with fury simmering under his polished exterior. He demanded answers. Why was his name listed as an emergency contact? Why had he been summoned about a child he didn't know? The staff insisted. His name was on the file, attached to a newborn struggling for breath. They led him to a small room where Lena sat hunched over her baby, her eyes red from crying, her body trembling from exhaustion. She looked up and froze. The wrong text, the mistake, had become something else. Fate had dragged them both here. At first, Adrian thought it was a scam. A setup. Someone trying to exploit his wealth. But when he saw the baby, tiny, fragile, gasping for air, something inside him shifted. The infant's hand, impossibly small, curled around his finger. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something he couldn't buy, couldn't control, vulnerability. But his instincts warred against him. He pulled away, demanding answers from Lena. She explained in broken words, the mistake, the number, the plea for help meant for her sister. She never imagined he'd actually show up. As the hours passed, Adrian watched the struggle unfold. The baby's breathing shallow, the doctors rushing, Lena's desperate prayers. He saw a world so far removed from his own, a world where survival wasn't measured in profit margins but in seconds of borrowed time. Yet even as compassion stirred in him, a darker truth surfaced. Behind Lena's exhaustion was a story of discrimination. She had been denied better care before, brushed aside, treated as invisible because of her race and her poverty. The system had failed her long before this night. And now, staring at her child, Adrian realized this wasn't just one mother's fight, it was the fight of millions unseen. Still, the question burned, why had his name been listed? Why him, of all people? He dug deeper, pressing the staff, searching records. What he uncovered would lead him to a truth he wasn't ready to face. The revelation hit like a storm. Years ago, before his empire, Adrian had made choices, cold, calculated decisions that had left scars he never cared to trace. He had funded programs, hospitals, charities on paper, but behind the numbers were people. Real lives. Some of those lives had been erased by policies his companies enforced, policies that cut corners, stripped benefits, and left families to suffer. And now, fate had delivered one of those consequences directly into his hands. Lena's child, struggling to survive, had been born into the fallout of his empire's silent cruelty. The hospital's call wasn't an accident. Somewhere in the labyrinth of files, his name had surfaced, not as a father but as the man legally tied to the system that failed her. In that sterile room, surrounded by the beeping of machines, Adrian faced the weight of his own legacy. Lena's pain wasn't just personal, it was systemic. The baby's fight wasn't just medical, it was a battle against injustice woven into every layer of society. Adrian stood at the edge of two worlds. One where he walked away, retreating back into wealth and denial, and one where he confronted the truth. His breath caught as the monitors spiked, alarms blaring. Nurses rushed in, voices urgent. The baby's tiny chest struggled, rising and falling in desperate rhythm. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt powerless. All his wealth, all his influence, meant nothing against the fragility of a single breath. His hand reached instinctively, gripping the crib rail, whispering a silent promise he had no words for. The world narrowed to a single question. Would this child live long enough to expose the truth, or become another forgotten name in the endless list of those failed by injustice? The night stretched on, each minute a battle. Against all odds, the baby's breathing steadied. Fragile but alive. Lena collapsed in relief, tears streaming down her face as she held her child close. Adrian didn't leave. For hours he stood in silence, watching, absorbing, confronting everything he had tried to ignore. By dawn, he knew he could never go back to his old life untouched. The mistake that brought him here had revealed a truth he could not unsee. The system he benefited from was built on the suffering of people like Lena. People whose names never made headlines, whose struggles were dismissed, whose children were born already carrying the weight of inequality. When he finally walked out of the hospital, Adrian wasn't the same man who had walked in. He left behind more than money, he left behind denial. He carried with him a responsibility, a reckoning, and perhaps the first spark of redemption. Lena's story was not just hers. It was the story of countless mothers, countless families, countless children who faced discrimination, poverty, and neglect because of the color of their skin and the system stacked against them. And for those watching, the question lingers long after the video fades. How many more lives must be broken before change begins? How many mistakes, how many losses, how many innocent hands reaching for survival before the world finally listens? Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about a mistaken text. It was a story about injustice, about power, about the fragile thread of life, and the choice each of us has to either look away or to see, truly see, and act.